Hi there. So today we'll be discussing the second part of our computer program 11B discussion. So for today we'll be discussing how to use method parameters in return statements. So in this chapter we'll be learning the following, and today we'll be focusing our discussion here in adding parameters to the methods and creating those methods that can return values. Now, first of all, let's go ahead and differentiate what are arguments and parameters. First of all, arguments are data items set to the methods in the method call. So you have a particular item. It can be a value, that will be sent to the methods in a specific method calls. Now, parameters on the other hand are the data items received by a method. So when the method receives the data items, they're called what we call parameters. So again, arguments sent, those data items. Parameters, on the other hand, receive those data items. So methods that receive data are flexible. Why? Because it can actually produce different results depending on what data they receive. So we'll be having an example later on. So when a method receive a parameter, its declaration contains the same elements as one that doesn't accept a parameter optional access specifiers. Now, the return type for the method name, and a set of parentheses that includes the different items. So, first of all, we have the parameter types and a local name for your parameter. Now, let's take a look at this example here that I have provided. So, you have the public static void, predict race. So, predict race is the name of the method. Now, inside the parenthesis of predict race method is what we have the double salary. Double is a data type and salary is a variable. Okay, now let's think of the parenthesis in a method declaration as a funnel into the method. Parameters listed there contains data that's dropped into the method. So it can actually include the following. First of all, primitive data types such as integer, double, and characters. Can also be built-in classes such as string or print stream, or a class type you create. Let's take a look at this. So inside the public static void predict race method, it has actually a parameter data type which is a double and an identifier which is the salary. What does it mean? So meaning, once you called this predict race method in your main method, inside the predict race parenthesis method inside the main method, it should contain a value that is a double. Say for example, you have predict race 0.5. Now 0.5 value will now be stored in the salary variable, and it will automatically execute and perform the following statements here. So method header for the predict race, the parameter double salary within the parenthesis indicates that the method will receive a value of type double, and that within the method the passed value will be known as salary. Now, in the predict race methods, the parameter is a double, so meaning you can use any particular arguments that can be promoted to a double. So what are double data types? Those are values that contains decimal places. So it can also accept the following. Even though it's double, technically it can still accept float, long, integer, short, and byte data types. However, if your predict race method has a parameter data type which is an integer, it can only accept only integer, long, short, and byte, not double and float. So the argument can be a constant, a variable, or more complicated expression. Now let's take a look at the following valid method calls. So you have your main method. Now you have inside the main method is actually the predict trace method that you will be calling. So these are the different valid method calls. So first of all, we have inside the method is the value 1000. Now this is a valid call because 1000 can be converted into 1000.00, which can be promoted to a double. Same goes through with this one. This is an unnamed double constant. This one, the 16.55 multiplied by 40, is also a valid method call. So it uses arithmetic expression. Here, predict race. Now take a look. Standard underscore salary is a variable. Now the standard underscore salary, which was declared as a variable before it was being called, and contains any numerical values, integers, and double, it's still valid. Now we have also the predict race my salary. So it also uses a variable that might be a double, float, long, integer, short, or byte. Now here's the fun part in using methods. Now using methods, or inside the method, you can actually call another method. Okay, so this call assumes that the get current salary method used as an argument and returns a double, float, long, short, or byte. So that means this here, the get current salary automatic, it should have a value that came from the method get current salary, which was being set earlier. Okay, the set get parameters, in which in which they call it. So we'll be discussing that further. So now here, let's analyze a program here that I have created. First of all, we have the class demo race, a main method. Okay, so inside the main method, we declared a variable salary, which is double, and a variable starting wage, which is a double. So I have placed there a value each. I printed out demonstrating some races. Now here's the thing. I have here three methods with three different values. So first of all, the predict race 400.00, that means we are calling this predict race. Okay, and we will be passing the value of 400 into salary. Okay, so Java will read this first. So automatic, the value of salary will be 400, and will perform this system that auto print line. Take note, the current value of salary is 400. Okay, the current value of salary is 400. So that means it will now perform this statements here. So it doesn't have any return type, so meaning it's still void. So whatever the value or whatever the result that will be printed out here will still stay the same and will not be passed out or passed back to the main method. That's it. So you have the first line demonstrating some races and printed this out, the current salary. Now here's the thing, the program will not end because the main method still contains another predict trace salary. What's the value of our salary? 400. No, it's not 400, it's 200. Why? Again, the return type here is void. So that means you did not return anything. Okay, so even though the first value of salary from here is 400, it actually stays as 400 here. And after that, since it's a void, anything will be voided out. Okay, and we'll proceed with the next line, which is the predict raise salary. Now, it will not check, or it will not get the value of salary from the method here, but from this salary value, which is 200. Got it? So it will automatically get the value of 200 and will pass that value here. Okay, it so happened that the salary here is the same with this one. It's legal. Why is it legal even though we have two same variables? Number one, because it was actually declared from different methods. Yes, you can declare or reuse another variable name for as long as it was actually used from or to a different method. So the new value of salary, or not really the value of salary is 200, so it will not perform here. Next, it will automatically be voided out and will now get the value of starting wage, which was declared here as 800. So if you'll try to analyze, it's actually a placeholder. Salary here is a placeholder while it's being used within the predict raise method. So no matter what the name its value goes by in the calling method, the parameter salary is a local variable to the predict raise method, as I have said. So automatic. This double salary variable here will be voided out. Okay. So now you can also create a method that requires multiple parameters. Now let's take a look at this example. So you have predict raise using rate. Apparently in Java, and particularly in methods, you can create a methods with 2 or more parameters. Meaning, if you will be trying to use this or call this method, you have to make sure to pass a value in a line with the data types that are actually being sent. So, as you can see, the double salary and double rate. A method can now be required more than one parameter, and yes, this time it accepts 2 different parameters. Now, take note that parameters appear within the parentheses in the method header. A comma separates each parameter, and each parameter requires its own declared type. So in the example here, both are double as well as its own identifier. So a declaration for a method that receives 2 or more parameters must list the type for each parameter, as I have said. Okay, and even the parameters have the same type. So if you have 2 parameters inside the method, you have to make sure to pass values with the same data types that you will be sending out. Okay, so you can pass multiple arguments to a method by listing the arguments within the call to the method and separating them with commas. Arguments are being passed to the method's parameters, and arguments to a method must be passed in the correct order. Take a look at this. Hold on. So let's try to analyze this program here. So you have a class, compute commission. You have here a main method, and inside the main method are the following declarations. So you have character v type, you have integer value 23,000, double comma rate. So we called the following, or we called a single method with different parameters, multiple parameters to be exact. So the first time that we called the compute commission, we actually called this value, comrade and vtype. And we called this compute commission with the following and performed this entire method here. Now let's talk about how to create some methods that can return some values. Now, a method ends when any of the following events takes place. So you have to remember the following. First of all, the method completes all of its statements. So I actually mentioned this earlier from our program simulation. The method throws an exception. Now, based from what you have learned from your previous computer programming 11A, exceptions are errors. So if there are some instances that your program, if you actually inserted some exceptions or try-catch methods, yes, it can actually, your method can actually end if the method reaches a return statement, which will be discussed further. So now the return statements, it causes a method to end and the program's logic to return to the calling method. Now from the word itself, return, it's returning or sending a value back to the calling method. So earlier I have mentioned that the return type that we have right now is what we call the void return type, meaning it doesn't return any of those values. So now these are the following return types for a method. So we have integer, double, char, and so on for primitive types. For class types, including class types you create, of course, a method can also return nothing, which is considered as what we call void. So a method that prompts a user for an age, so for example, and returns the age, the calling method might be declared as. Now take a look at this one. So you notice from this public static int get age, you notice that the word void is not included because this time you are actually asking for a value to the user. So that means there will be a certain value that will be returning back to your method. So in this case, instead of you using void, you are using now the integer get age. So this method returns an int, so its type is integer. So a method that returns true or false, depending on whether an employee worked overtime hours, might be declared as this one. So instead of you using integer, you will be using public static boolean worked overtime. So this method returns a boolean value, so it is boolean type. So it only returns true or false. Same goes through with double. So here you have your public static double. Instead of you using void, this time you use data type double because you have to make sure to return a value or a double value based from the statement here. Now let's take a look again. Recalling the previous programs that we have simulated earlier, we passed a value to the salary. So inside the predict trace method that we have called in the main method, we actually included there the value. So for example, 200. Now the 200 will now be placed inside the salary variable. So this time you declared a new variable, which is the new amount, and perform the calculations here and stored the value of salary multiplied by the raise in the new amount variable. So notice the keyword return. So that means if you have seen the word return, meaning you are actually trying to return the new, or you are trying to return the value that was actually performed or executed inside your main method or inside the method itself. So in this case, you are returning the value of new amount. So there are some few reminders here. So it can return one value at most. So it's impossible for you to return multiple values. So the return value can be a variable, a named or unnamed constant, or another method call. So for example, these are valid returns. So if you would like to return a value true, it can be possible. If you would like to return a value or a variable, yes, it's actually valid. It can also return another method with a value provided here in my get salary method. It's possible. So imagine having a method that calls another method, or imagine having a method which actually trying to return a value from a called method. So that's actually possible. So if a method returns a value, then when you call the method, you normally use the return value. So although you are not required to do so. So for example, when you invoke the predict trace method earlier, you might want to assign the return value like this one. So for example, you have here a new variable, my new salary, which now contains the returned value from the predict trace method. There you go. That's actually possible. So the predict trace method returns a double, so it is appropriate to assign the method's return value to a double variable. You can choose to use a method's return value directly without storing it in any variable. So for example, you would like to use or print this one, new salary plus this one. Yes, you can do this. It's possible for you to use this without actually storing it in another variable. Another reminder, you can use the method call in the same way that you would use any simple double value. As another example, you can perform arithmetic with a method's return value as in the following statements. For example here, so you have a spending money variable which was assigned as a double that actually performs a subtraction between a method call with a returned value minus the expenses, which contains a certain value as well. So in this statement, the value of my salary is not altered. This one, the only change variable is spending money here. So if you want my salary to hold the value of the new salary with the raise, then you could use the following statements. There you go. So you can also chain methods. So another method or any method might call any number of other methods, as I have mentioned earlier. So for example, a main method might call a predict trace method, and the predict trace method might call another method inside of it. So for example here, so imagine you have the main method here somewhere, and inside the main method is a predict trace method. So inside the predict trace method, it will now execute the following. Now take note that here on this part, it called another method somewhere here, which also includes a different sets of statements. So yeah, the predict trace method calling the calculate bonus method. So two possible versions of the calculate bonus methods here. So let's take a look here once again. So you are trying to assign the new amount of bonus amount here from the call method. So the first way here, or first version, is this one. So you have here the new amount as the value, okay, that you will be passing out to this method. So in this case, the new amount directly came from the salary multiplied by the raise. So whatever the amount of the new amount here will now be placed in a variable double salary. Once again, do not be confused with the double salary here and the salary that was declared from the main method, it's actually different. Okay, so here you go. Don't mind the final keyword here. We'll be discuss that further. There you go. So another version here is, what's the difference? What's the difference between the two of them? So both of them actually returns the salary which contains a value that came from a calculated or an expression that was performed, right? However, the difference between them is the second one. Instead of having a value of salary, it called another method inside the calculate bonus method. So you can actually chain multiple and endless methods in Java. Okay, so do you have any questions?